by popular demand, next up in the 2024 Heat Check series is Kentucky guard Reed Sheppard, who took college basketball by storm this season as one of the best freshmen in the country. Sheppard was ranked as a 4-star recruit by every major recruiting service, ranking number 33 per RSCI, and not necessarily being tagged as a future NBAer, and especially as a one and done. He's got a really stocky build at 6'3"-ish, and averaged 12.5 points, 4.5 assists, 4.1 rebounds, 2.5 steals, and 0.7 blocks per game, while shooting 54% overall, 52% from beyond the arc, and 83% from the line. Here's how Heat Check works. I'm going to identify one draft prospect and grade them on what I believe to be the most generally important skills and aspects of their game: athleticism, scoring, defense, passing and playmaking, and overall feel for the game. After those 5, I'll grade one additional skill relative to that prospect that I think is going to have the biggest effect on their stock. That will be deemed the swing skill. Each skill will be graded on the Heat Check chart, with ranges from freezing all the way to scorching. When that's all said and done, I'll divvy out one final overall score. Starting with Sheppard's athleticism, despite being a smaller combo guard, Sheppard is likely going to be an average NBA athlete, maybe slightly below average in a few departments. It's mostly his size that hinders him rather than his true textbook athleticism. He's actually got a decent amount of verticality, which he's able to use sparingly on both ends of the court. He's of course not going to jump out of the gym often, and he's quick but doesn't have elite speed, but he makes up for it in a variety of other ways. Sheppard's athleticism highlight reel consists mainly of his innate coordination and expert level use of his hands, both on offense and defense. Some of the more specific things, a snappy first step, acceleration, and burst, aren't quite there, but we'll touch more on that later. At his core, Reed Sheppard is a shooter. He scored the bulk of his collegiate points via spot-up shooting, cashing in on a blistering 52% of 4.4 threes attempted per game. He's got a simple, quick-fire release that he can get up from a variety of angles, and while his shot diet could have stood to gain a little more overall variety, he's certainly capable of making some tough looks, and he hunts those looks with ferocity, flying around to abandoned space on or off ball. To save you some time, he ranks excellent in every shot type per synergy that isn't around the rim, and simply put, he's one of, if not the best shooter in this class, with the perimeter skill set that should translate seamlessly. He looks really comfortable shooting both off ball and off the dribble. I'm sure the numbers favor him spotting up, but his brisk pull-up jumper makes him a really dangerous option. Outputs of 24 points against Florida, 27 points against Tennessee, and 32 versus Mississippi State all highlight that skill. As a quicker guard, he also scored a decent amount on ball, using some craft, speed, and shiftiness to weasel his way to the ring, primarily being used as the pick and roll handler in those situations, which he ranked excellent in per synergy. He did make near 60% of his attempts at the rim once there, a good mark for a small guard. His issue lies more in getting to the rim than getting the ball through the hoop, which we'll touch on more a bit later. Overall, Sheppard does a few things at a pretty elite level, but isn't necessarily in that category at all 3 levels, leading to the warm grade here. Still, there's no doubt he'd make a positive impact for most teams in certain roles. Sheppard's defense is a really polarizing category. His 3.2 stocks per game were elite, especially against the kind of competition Kentucky was facing on a nightly basis. But there are enough lapses to give coaches some headaches too, and mixed with the fact that he's just 6'3", there's a world out there where the NBA jump is a really tough one for him to make on that end of the floor. Ultimately, I've landed on a warm grade. I'm not necessarily throwing all my stock, for lack of a better word, into purely the steal and block numbers, but I'm also not convinced the NBA jump is going to get the best of him either. The counting stats didn't appear out of thin air. Sheppard garnered 2.5 steals per game with clairvoyant anticipation for jumping lanes, pesky pokes and jabs off ball, and those really sharp aforementioned hands when he's engaged on ball. He is constantly probing for a way to pick your pocket. His 23 blocks in 33 games as a 6'3" freshman is pretty undeniable too. Again, Sheppard is not overly lengthy or athletic, but he just has impeccable awareness for putting himself in the right place at the right time. The off-ball product is mostly pretty good. He's attentive and obviously good playmaker most nights with the ability to turn that into offense. There is a bit of ball watching being done, but I think for the most part he turns those situations into positives more often than not. As we'll talk about in a bit, I think Sheppard's feel for the game is pretty world-class, and I simply can't envision him being a flat-out bad defender in the NBA. His tools might keep him from being elite, but I think in the end I'll bank on his awareness and instinctual style. For Reed Sheppard's passing and playmaking, I've gone with a hot grade. In 33 games, Sheppard boasted a 146 to 66 assist to turnover ratio, toggling between point guard and shooting guard in the backup role alongside Rob Dillingham. The things to note here revolve less around Sheppard's passing velocity and accuracy, which are really good, but more in his court vision, play recognition, and general awareness of what's happening around him. And that's not super typical of most prospects. I think there's plenty of creativity in his passing and playmaking. It feels like he's constantly scanning for openings and takes advantages of pretty small windows. With consistency, he can whip cross-court passes with relative ease, has some ambidextrous stuff in his bag, and can bust out a full court outlet that gets my draft spider senses tingling. Most simply, Sheppard's a pretty adept floor general capable of finding the open man, running your set pieces, and creating looks in moderation. One of the few things holding me back from a perfect scorching grade in this department is his lack of advanced creation, which again we'll touch on more here in a bit. Connecting that to his passing and playmaking though, he's just not able to constantly access all parts of the court with his tools, so despite being a great passer, it can kind of pigeonhole him to the perimeter or specific driving lanes. I think that specifically leaves some questions about whether he's a full-time point guard or just a connective combo guard, but overall, Reed Sheppard's passing is a big hit. Sheppard is one of, if not the highest field player in this class. There's really no way around it. You can't put up the numbers he did, and more importantly, impact basketball games the way he did without having feel for the game. He's magnetic to space on the offensive end, has a good shot diet, he inputs the game and spits out the right play like the Terminator. Again, he had over 3 stocks per game, not via tools, but with quick recognition, anticipation, instincts. And as you're probably starting to learn, that's sort of the name of the game with Reed Sheppard. Tools aside, he just plays winning basketball, and a box plus minus of 11.6, the highest in the nation for a freshman, backs that up. There's a lot to like about Sheppard that's a bit inexplicable, but feel for the game is likely the easiest way to sum it up. Moving on to Sheppard's swing skill, which, as we've already touched on several times now, is his creation potential. I think there's enough of a handling base to say that Sheppard could theoretically function as a full-time lead guard, but there's just a bit too much rigidity there for me to feel comfortable in him as the lead creator. He's got the burst to speed by slow-footed bigs, something that should be translatable at the next level, but there's not enough pure acceleration, and he doesn't have a dribble move arsenal to dip into for truly adept POA guys or strong defensive guards. There's no question he has trouble turning that corner sometimes. Even in the pick and roll, he can be reliant on stepping back. That especially probably isn't going to change at the next level without some serious handle development. But there is some craft to his game. He's got some nice stop and start, decel things going for him, and a large portion of his at-rim buckets were unassisted. A good notch in the creation belt, but likely a negative on his cutting game. But make no mistake, Reed Sheppard does not need to create at a high level to be a good and impactful basketball player. We're just covering it because this video is a ground-up assessment. We have to go over it, and it does limit his potential as an on-ball star. The grade. I've given Reed Sheppard a grade of 8, which is undoubtedly going to land him as a top 10 selection for me in 2024. Depending on how some of my later scouting reports go, that might get him as high as 5. There's no question Sheppard impacted Kentucky basketball at a near alarming rate in his freshman season. But I also think there are a lot of really fair questions about his role based off the numbers he put up and the things I've covered in this video. To definitively pick a side, in my mind at the next level, Reed Sheppard is a connective shooting guard who's capable of moonlighting as a point guard in moderation in the already near positionless NBA. I think the shooting is very legit and will continue to be. His passing and playmaking will stand out at the NBA level, and the defense doesn't give me enough pause overall to dock him too much. And in the screen-laden NBA, how much pure creation is he really going to need? The biggest knock on Sheppard is going to be the tools in his toolbox, and to this point, he seems to have thrown that notion out and is instead operating with heavy machinery. All in all, I think his concoction of skills makes him a future NBA starter, and the low-end outcome of Reed Sheppard is still probably a pretty impactful bench guard. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think of Reed Sheppard, a prospect who is sure to be polarizing in 2024. Let me know what you grade him, where you draft him, drop who you want to see in the next one. We'll see you later.